The story of King Nebuchadnezzar, and why God turned him into an animal, is a dramatic and profound tale found in Daniel 4. It's a lesson about humility, pride, and God's sovereign power over all earthly kingdoms. Nebuchadnezzar was the powerful king of Babylon, known for constructing the magnificent city of Babylon, including the Hanging Gardens, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. However, his success led him to become arrogant and forget that his power came from God, not his own strength. Nebuchadnezzar's dream, Daniel 4:18. One night, Nebuchadnezzar had a disturbing dream about a towering tree that reached to the heavens, visible to the ends of the earth. The tree was lush and provided food and shelter to many creatures, but suddenly, a Holy One came down from heaven and ordered the tree to be cut down, leaving only the stump in the ground. The Holy One also declared that the tree would lose its mind and live among animals, eating grass like cattle for 7 times, often interpreted as 7 years, until he recognized that the Most High rules over the kingdoms of men. The interpretation, Daniel 4:19-27. Nebuchadnezzar was troubled and summoned Daniel, known for interpreting dreams. Daniel explained that the tree symbolized Nebuchadnezzar himself. God was warning him that his pride would lead to his downfall. If the king didn't humble himself and recognize God's sovereignty, he would be driven away from people, lose his sanity, and live like an animal for 7 years. Daniel urged Nebuchadnezzar to repent and change his ways, perhaps delaying the judgment. Nebuchadnezzar's pride and downfall, Daniel 4:28-33. Despite the warning, a year later, Nebuchadnezzar stood on the roof of his palace and boasted about the great city of Babylon, which he claimed to have built by his own power for his own glory. At that very moment, a voice from heaven declared that the prophecy had come true. Nebuchadnezzar was immediately struck with madness. He was driven from human society and lived in the wild like an animal, eating grass and growing hair and nails like a beast. This condition, often referred to as boanthropy, in which a person believes they are a cow or ox, is a rare mental illness. But in Nebuchadnezzar's case, it was a divine judgment intended to humble him. The restoration and acknowledgement of God, Daniel 4:30-37. After the 7 years, Nebuchadnezzar's sanity was restored, and he immediately praised and glorified God, acknowledging that the Most High is the one true ruler over all kingdoms, and that his dominion is eternal. Nebuchadnezzar's reign was restored, and his kingdom became even greater than before. But this time, the king's heart had changed. He recognized that his power and success came not from his own abilities, but from the sovereign God, who gives and takes away power as he wills. Why did God turn Nebuchadnezzar into an animal? God's purpose in turning Nebuchadnezzar into an animal was to humble him. The king's arrogance and belief that his power came solely from his own achievements displeased God. Throughout the Bible, pride is condemned, and humility is praised. Nebuchadnezzar's punishment demonstrated that human power is limited, and all authority comes from God. This story illustrates a powerful biblical theme. God resists the proud but gives grace to the humble. James 4:6. By making Nebuchadnezzar live as an animal, God showed that even the mightiest rulers are subject to his will, and only by recognizing God's authority can they truly prosper. In the end, Nebuchadnezzar's story is one of redemption. His transformation from prideful king to humble servant of God is a testament to God's mercy and willingness to restore those who turn back to him in repentance. After King Nebuchadnezzar's reign, Babylon underwent significant political changes. Nebuchadnezzar ruled Babylon for over 40 years, and after his death in 562 BC, the Babylonian Empire began to decline. His son, Marduk, also known as Evil Merodach, succeeded him, but only ruled for about 2 years before he was overthrown by his brother-in-law Nriglissar. Nriglissar ruled for a brief period, and was followed by his son Marduk, who was also quickly overthrown. Ultimately, Nabonidus came to power, but his reign was marred by internal struggles, and he spent much of his time away from Babylon, leaving his son Belshazzar as co-regent. During this period, Babylon weakened. Setting the stage for its eventual conquest by the Persian Empire, enter Cyrus the Great in 539 BC. The fall of Babylon marked the end of its status as a dominant empire in the ancient Near East. Theologically, the story of Nebuchadnezzar leaves a legacy in which Babylon represents pride and rebellion against God in biblical prophecy. Nebuchadnezzar's humbling experience and subsequent acknowledgement of God stands in contrast to Babylon's later downfall. His story becomes a moral lesson in recognizing divine authority, while Babylon's eventual fall symbolizes the defeat of human arrogance before God's power. Babylon, once one of the greatest empires of the ancient world, experienced a gradual decline after the death of Nebuchadnezzar II. Following his rule, the empire faced instability due to internal power struggles and weaker leadership. This led to its eventual conquest by the Persian Empire, enter Cyrus the Great in 539 BC, which marked the official end of Babylon as a dominant power. The fall of Babylon. The fall of Babylon is famously depicted in the Bible's book of Daniel, Daniel 5, where Belshazzar, the last king of Babylon, saw the writing on the wall during a banquet, foretelling the kingdom's imminent end. The Persians conquered the city without much resistance, partly due to discontent within the empire and the strategic brilliance of Cyrus. Cyrus entered Babylon, and according to historical accounts like those from Herodotus and Xenophon, he diverted the Euphrates River, which allowed his army to enter the city through the river bed. The fall of Babylon was relatively peaceful compared to other conquests, as Cyrus was seen as a liberator by many of the city's inhabitants. Babylon under Persian rule. After the conquest, Babylon became a province within the Persian Empire and retained some importance as a cultural and economic center. However, it no longer held political autonomy or power. Cyrus respected Babylonian customs and allowed the local population to continue their religious practices. He is also known for freeing the Jewish exiles and allowing them to return to Jerusalem, as described in the Cyrus Cylinder and the Book of Ezra, Ezra 1:1-4. Babylon's later history. During the subsequent centuries, Babylon saw a slow decline. It was absorbed into various empires, including the Macedonian Empire after Alexander the Great conquered Persia. In 331 BC, Alexander saw Babylon as a potential capital for his empire, and even planned significant reconstruction, but he died there unexpectedly in 323 BC. Following his death, Babylon's significance diminished as the region was divided between his successors. By the time of the Seleucid Empire, Babylon was overshadowed by the rise of other cities like Seleucia. Over the centuries, Babylon was gradually abandoned, and by the early centuries AD, it was in ruins. Babylon in prophecy and symbolism. In the Bible and later Christian theology, Babylon became symbolic of human arrogance and opposition to God. The city's fall was seen as a metaphor for the downfall of all kingdoms that defy divine authority. In the book of Revelation, Babylon is referred to as the Whore of Babylon, symbolizing corrupt world powers. Revelation 17. Today, the ruins of Babylon are located near the modern-day city of Hilla in Iraq. Efforts to restore the site were made in the 20th century, but Babylon remains largely an archaeological site, a shadow of its former grandeur. In summary, after Nebuchadnezzar's reign, Babylon's decline was marked by internal strife, eventual conquest by Persia, and a gradual fall into obscurity, though its cultural and historical legacy remains significant. After the fall of Babylon, in 539 BC, Cyrus the Great, the king of Persia, became the ruler of Babylon. Cyrus, who founded the Achaemenid Empire, successfully conquered the city and incorporated Babylon into his growing Persian Empire. His conquest of Babylon marked the beginning of the Persian period in Mesopotamian history, and under Persian rule, Babylon continued to serve as a major administrative and cultural center. Persian rule, 539 BC, 331 BC. Cyrus the Great, 559–530 BC. After conquering Babylon, Cyrus was known for his relatively tolerant rule. He respected the local customs and religious practices of the Babylonians, and even allowed exiled peoples, such as the Jews, to return to their homelands. This act is well documented in the Cyrus Cylinder, and in the Bible, Ezra 1:1-4. Cambyses II, 530–522 BC, Cyrus' son, Cambyses, ruled after him, continuing the expansion of the Persian Empire. However, he focused more on military conquests, and left the administrative running of Babylon mostly untouched. Darius I, 520–486 BC, following a period of instability after Cambyses' death, Darius I took control of the empire. He implemented administrative reforms and introduced a system of provinces, or satrapies, in which Babylon was one of the most important. Xerxes I, 486–465 BC, Xerxes dealt with multiple rebellions in Babylon, and his reign marked a period of decline in the city's importance. He is known for destroying parts of Babylon's temples, after a rebellion in 482 BC, which symbolized a shift in Persian attitudes toward the city. Macedonian rule, 331 BC, 323 BC. Alexander the Great, 336–323 BC. In 331 BC, Alexander the Great defeated the Persian king Darius II at the Battle of Gaugamela, effectively ending the Achaemenid Empire. Alexander then took control of Babylon, and the city became a major hub of his empire. He even planned to make Babylon the capital of his vast empire. However, Alexander died in 323 BC in Babylon, leaving his empire fragmented. Hellenistic rule, 323 BC, 141 BC. After Alexander's death, his empire was divided among his generals, leading to the wars of the Diadochi, successors. Babylon became part of the Seleucid Empire, founded by Seleucus I Nicator, one of Alexander's generals. Over time, however, Babylon's significance waned as Seleucia, a new city founded by Seleucus on the Tigris River, became the administrative center of the region. Parthian and Sasanian rule, 141 BC, 650 AD. Babylon continued to exist under the Parthian Empire, starting in 141 BC, though it was no longer a major city. The Parthians, who controlled much of the former Persian Empire, allowed Babylon to remain as a provincial town. Eventually, the Sasanian Empire, 220–650 AD, took control of the region, and by this time, Babylon had declined significantly and was largely abandoned. Final decline. By the time of the Islamic conquest of Persia, in the 7th century AD, Babylon was in ruins. The city had been mostly abandoned for centuries and faded from prominence. Its ruins, located near modern-day Hilla, Iraq, became an archaeological site in later centuries after Babylon's fall. It was ruled first by the Persians, then by Alexander the Great, followed by the Seleucid Empire, and later by the Parthians and Sasanians. Each of these empires left their mark on the ancient city, but its significance declined over time. The Persian Empire, also known as the Achaemenid Empire, was one of the largest and most powerful empires in ancient history. However, like all great empires, it eventually declined and fell, succumbing to external forces and internal challenges. Here's a breakdown of what happened to Persia. Achaemenid Empire, 550 BC, 330 BC. The Achaemenid Empire was founded by Cyrus the Great in 550 BC, uniting various kingdoms under Persian control, including Babylon, Egypt, and parts of India. It reached its height under Darius I and Xerxes I, stretching from the Indus Valley in the east to Greece and Egypt in the west. The Persians developed a highly efficient administrative system, including satrapies, provinces, governed by local officials, and they were known for their tolerance of different cultures and religions. The fall of the Achaemenid Empire. The Achaemenid Empire began to weaken due to internal revolts, struggles for the throne, and military defeats. The empire's downfall came when Alexander the Great of Macedonia, invaded Persia in 330 BC in a series of decisive battles, including the famous Battle of Gaugamela. In 331 BC, Alexander defeated the Persian king Darius III. After Darius III's death, Alexander took control of the Persian Empire, effectively ending the Achaemenid dynasty. Hellenistic period, 330 BC, 247 BC. Following the fall of the Achaemenids, Persia was absorbed into Alexander the Great's empire. After Alexander's death in 323 BC, his empire was divided among his generals, and Persia fell under the control of the Seleucid Empire, one of the successor states ruled by Seleucus I Nicator. The Seleucids ruled Persia for over a century, but their grip weakened as they faced internal revolts and pressure from emerging powers. Parthian Empire, 247 BC, 224 AD. In 247 BC, the Parthians, a group from northeastern Iran, overthrew the Seleucids in Persia and established the Parthian Empire. The Parthians ruled Persia for nearly 500 years, resisting repeated Roman invasions and developing a feudal system of governance. Their capital was at Ctesiphon, near modern-day Baghdad. The Parthian Empire's decentralized nature eventually led to its weakening, and in 224 AD, it was overthrown by the Sassanid dynasty. Sassanid Empire, 224 AD, 651 AD. The Sassanid Empire was the last pre-Islamic Persian empire, founded by Ardashir I after defeating the Parthians. The Sassanids raised centralized authority, revitalized Zoroastrianism as the state religion, and engaged in ongoing conflicts with the Roman, later Byzantine, Empire. The Sassanid Empire was highly influential, making significant cultural and technological advancements. It represented the peak of Persian civilization before the Islamic conquests. The fall of the Sassanid Empire. The Sassanid Empire was severely weakened by years of war with the Byzantine Empire and internal instability. In 651 AD, during the reign of Yazdegerd III, the Sassanids were defeated by the Rashidun Caliphate, marking the Islamic conquest of Persia. Persia became part of the expanding Islamic Empire, and over the centuries, Persian culture adapted to and influenced the Islamic world. Zoroastrianism, the state religion of the Sassanids, was largely replaced by Islam, though small Zoroastrian communities continued to exist. Islamic period and later dynasties. After the Islamic conquest, Persia was ruled by various Muslim dynasties, including the Umayyads and Abbasids. Despite the Arab conquest, Persia retained a strong cultural identity, and Persian scholars, poets, and scientists played a significant role in shaping Islamic civilization. Later on, the Safavid dynasty, 1501–1736, re-established a Persian state and promoted Shia Islam as the official religion, marking a major turning point in Persian and Islamic history. After the fall of the Achaemenid Empire, Persia went through several phases of foreign and local rule, first by the Hellenistic Seleucids, then the Parthians, and finally the Sassanids, before it was conquered by Islamic forces. Despite these changes in political control, Persia maintained a distinct cultural identity, which has persisted to this day in the form of modern Iran. The fall of Persia, specifically the Achaemenid Empire, was primarily caused by a combination of internal weaknesses and external invasions. Here are the major factors that contributed to Persia's fall. 1. Internal instability and succession struggles. After the long and stable reign of Darius I and Xerxes I, the Achaemenid Empire saw a series of weak rulers who struggled to maintain control over the vast territories. Succession disputes and palace intrigues weakened the central authority. For instance, the assassination of Artaxerxes II in 338 BC led to further instability as rulers like Darius II were seen as ineffective. The large size of the empire made governance difficult, with satraps, provincial governors, often holding immense power. Some regions began to act autonomously, further fragmenting control. 2. Military weaknesses. Despite the impressive size of the Persian military, it had some significant flaws. The empire relied heavily on a variety of troops from different regions, which sometimes led to coordination issues and lack of loyalty. By the time of Darius III, the once mighty Persian army was in decline and had lost much of its effectiveness. At the Battle of Gaugamela, 331 BC, Alexander the Great's smaller but highly trained Macedonian army defeated the much larger Persian force, exposing these weaknesses. Alexander the Great's invasion, 330 BC. The most direct cause of the Achaemenid Empire's fall was Alexander the Great's invasion. Starting in 334 BC, Alexander launched a well-coordinated and relentless campaign against Persia. His superior military tactics, along with his ability to quickly adapt to different battle situations, gave him a decisive edge over the Persians. Darius III's inability to unite his empire's forces and effectively counter Alexander's campaign led to a series of major defeats, culminating in the Battle of Gaugamela, after which Alexander was able to march unopposed into Babylon and other key Persian cities. Corruption and decline in leadership. Toward the end of the Achaemenid Empire, corruption among the satraps, provincial governors, and court officials became more common. Many local leaders acted in their own interests, undermining the authority of the central government. Darius III, the last king of Persia, is often criticized for being indecisive and ineffective in responding to the threat posed by Alexander. He failed to inspire loyalty from his own satraps, many of whom betrayed him during the campaigns. 5. Cultural and ethnic diversity. The vastness of the Persian Empire, which stretched from Egypt to India, was home to many different cultures, languages, and religions. Although the Achaemenid rulers were relatively tolerant, this diversity created challenges for maintaining unity. In times of crisis, these diverse populations had little incentive to remain loyal to a weakened central government, and many regions saw revolts, or simply didn't offer effective resistance to Alexander's forces. 6. Economic strain. Maintaining such a vast empire required enormous resources. Constant wars, large building projects, and the need to maintain a vast military stretched the empire's economy. Heavy taxation to support these activities alienated some of the provinces, especially those far from the Persian heartland. Additionally, the Persian economy began to suffer due to ineffective leadership and corruption within the administrative structure, which weakened the empire's ability to fund its defense. 7. Geopolitical pressures. The Achaemenid Empire constantly faced external threats from various directions, including the Greeks and Scythians. The Greco-Persian Wars, 499–449 BC, significantly weakened Persia, and while the empire managed to maintain dominance for a century afterward, Greek ambitions didn't end there. By the time of Philip II of Macedon and his son Alexander, the Greek states had unified under Macedonian leadership, which allowed them to focus their efforts on the eventual invasion of Persia. After the fall, Persian legacy. After the defeat of Darius III and the conquest of Persia by Alexander the Great, the Achaemenid Empire was absorbed into Alexander's expanding empire. Although Persia was no longer an independent empire, its culture, administration, and infrastructure influenced the subsequent Hellenistic empires, including the Seleucid Empire, which controlled much of former Persia after Alexander's death. Persian influence persisted through the Parthian and Sasanian empires, which rose in the centuries following the Achaemenids, and continued many of the traditions of Persian governance, culture, and religion. Persia's fall was caused by a mix of internal problems, such as political instability, corruption, and economic strain, and external pressures, like Alexander's invasion and military superiority, leading to the collapse of one of the most powerful empires in ancient history. Alexander the Great ruled through a combination of military dominance, cultural assimilation, and administrative innovation. His leadership style had a lasting impact on the regions he conquered, from Greece to Egypt, Persia, and even parts of India. Here's a detailed look at how Alexander governed: military conquests and strategy. Alexander's initial rise to power came through his military conquests, beginning with the defeat of the Persian Empire. His strategy relied on swift and decisive action, often engaging in direct confrontation with enemy leaders, as seen in his famous battles like Issus and Gaugamela against Darius III. His use of the phalanx formation, coupled with his elite cavalry, allowed him to defeat much larger armies. His military prowess made him both feared and respected by his enemies and allies. Respect for local cultures and religion. Alexander adopted a policy of cultural assimilation after conquering territories. He often respected and embraced the local customs, religions, and governance systems. For example, in Egypt, Alexander presented himself as a liberator from Persian rule, and was even declared a pharaoh. He visited the oracle of Ammon at Siwa, aligning himself with Egyptian religious traditions. In Persia, after defeating Darius, he maintained much of the administrative structure of the Achaemenid Empire. He adopted Persian customs, including the wearing of Persian clothing, and incorporating Persian officials into his administration. His willingness to merge Greek and local customs earned him both support and resentment. Some of his Greek and Macedonian officers were uncomfortable with his adoption of barbarian customs, which led to internal tensions within his army. Policy of fusion, Hellenization. One of Alexander's most significant contributions was the spread of Hellenistic culture. This process, known as Hellenization, involved blending Greek culture with the local cultures of the territories he conquered. He founded numerous cities, most famously Alexandria in Egypt, which became centers of Greek culture and influence. Alexander encouraged intermarriage between his soldiers and local women. He himself married Roxana, a princess from Bactria, modern-day Afghanistan, and later took Persian noblewomen as wives. Hellenization was not just about cultural spread but also about governance. Greek became the lingua franca in many parts of the empire, facilitating communication and administration. Administrative practices. Alexander largely maintained the existing administrative structures of the regions he conquered. For instance, he retained the Persian system of satrapies, or provinces, each governed by a satrap. However, he appointed both Macedonian officials and local leaders to ensure loyalty. He allowed a degree of local autonomy, especially in areas like Babylon and Egypt, where local leaders and traditions were maintained. This helped stabilize his empire, as local populations felt less threatened by the new regime. At the same time, Alexander established Greek-style cities throughout his empire, which were governed according to Greek political principles, creating a blend of Greek and local administrative systems. Divine kingship. As Alexander expanded his empire, he increasingly portrayed himself as a divine figure. This was especially evident in Egypt, where he was declared the son of the god Ammon. In Persia, he adopted the idea of divine kingship by taking on the title and rituals associated with the Persian monarchs, such as proskensis, the act of bowing or kneeling before a ruler. His growing sense of divinity caused friction with some of his Greek and Macedonian soldiers, who were uncomfortable with their king being treated as a god. The execution of those who opposed him, such as Clitus the Black, reflected the growing tension between his vision of rulership and the expectations of his companions. Economic and infrastructure development. Alexander's empire was marked by significant infrastructure development. He built roads, ports, and cities that improved trade and communication across his vast territories. The cities he founded often became trade hubs, connecting the Mediterranean with Asia. His conquests also led to the spread of coinage, further integrating the economies of his empire. The widespread use of silver and gold coins, minted with his image, helped create a unified economy. Death and legacy. Alexander died suddenly in 323 BC in Babylon, likely from illness, leaving no clear successor. His empire was vast, stretching from Greece to India, and upon his death, it was divided among his generals, known as the Diadochi, leading to the wars of the successors. While his empire did not remain unified after his death, his legacy endured through the Hellenistic kingdoms, e.g., the Ptolemaic and Seleucid empires, which preserved and spread Greek culture across the ancient world. Alexander's rule was characterized by military genius and strategic brilliance in expanding his empire, a policy of cultural fusion and the spread of Greek, Hellenistic, culture through the territories he conquered, respect for local traditions, often incorporating them into his governance, which helped maintain stability in his vast and diverse empire. An evolving view of kingship, with Alexander increasingly adopting the model of a divine ruler, particularly in the eastern parts of his empire. Despite the eventual fragmentation of his empire, Alexander's rule reshaped the ancient world by creating lasting connections between East and West. His conquest not only changed the political map but also set the stage for centuries of cultural and intellectual exchange. May your spiritual journey be filled with God's grace and peace. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video to inspire others on their walk with the Lord.